Adonai li velo yira.
Please rise for Kiddush. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et Shabbat, la'asod et Shabbat l'dorotam berid olam, beini uvein b'nei Yisrael, oti le'olam, ki sheshet yamim, asa Adonai et hashamayim v'et ha'aretz, uvayom hashvi shavad vayinafash. Al kein berach Adonai et yom ha'shabbat vayikadshehu, savri chaverai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Shabbat shalom. And I will invite Linda Leibowitz up to the floor podium to introduce our special program.
Well, before I get to that, I have to congratulate you on, oh, I'm sorry. That was an incredibly powerful sermon, a message that is just awesome for us all to hear and absorb. Excuse me. I hope it's something that we all take into our own discussions back at home and in the public arena to help understand what's going on now with the refugees and asylees in the world. Before I introduce Silvia, I wanted to just point out that there was a typo in my email that requested any questions that I would forward on to Silvia this morning, but unfortunately, my daughter noticed it this morning. She did send out another email to everybody with the correct spelling on my email, so I will look at those later and convey them to Silvia tomorrow, and I'll get answers for people who have submitted questions for the community. And anybody that's here today, of course, can come up to the microphone after Silvia speaks and ask her some questions directly. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to this part of the Refugee Shabbat. Silvia Finkelstein is our guest speaker today, and despite the fact that she and my husband share the same last name, and as much as I would love her to be related, we are not. I met Silvia first in the year 2000 when she came to the Nassau County DA's office, Special Victims Bureau, and I at the time was employed as a staff attorney at the Nassau County Legal Aid Society, defending people charged with domestic violence crimes. Although we were adversaries in the courtroom, Silvia and I respected each other as professionals and the significance of our different roles in the criminal justice system. On top of that, we became very good friends. Her career includes being the chief of the Child Abuse Unit, Deputy Bureau Chief of the Narcotics and Gang Bureau, and Chief of the Prescription Drug Unit. Since 2015, she has been the Director of the Office of Immigrant Affairs. Among other responsibilities, she coordinates investigations and prosecutions of crimes that target immigrants as victims, and advises the DA's office and the community on matters where criminal law and immigration law intersect. She chairs the Hispanic Latino Advisory Council to the District Attorney and the Faith Leaders Council. She is a founding member of the New York State District Attorney's League for Immigrant Affairs. I believe that Silvia has a wealth of information to share with us today, and I am thrilled that she's here to open our eyes to the many aspects of immigration in 2021.
Thank you so much, Linda, for the warm introduction. I am honored to join the Beth Shalom family today. Some of you may be wondering why there is an Office of Immigrant Affairs in the District Attorney's Office. And the reason is because our county is home to immigrants from countries all over the world. And unfortunately, immigrants are also victims of crimes and witnesses to crimes in our communities. Those who do not speak English well or who are not familiar with the laws of this country are particularly vulnerable to criminals who prey upon them. That is why Madeline Singas, our district attorney, created the Office of Immigrant Affairs to protect individuals that are being victimized and to encourage victims of crimes who are afraid of law enforcement to come forward. The goal of our program is to enhance the safety of all Nassau County residents. So the mission of the Office of Immigrant Affairs is to help our immigrant population seek assistance from the criminal justice system when they need it, to coordinate the prosecution of immigrant-related crime, and to uncover fraud schemes, wage theft, and labor violations that we are encountering that are primarily targeting our immigrant populations. In addition, we wish to support and encourage victims and witnesses to come forward. And our message to our immigrant residents is that our office, if you are a victim or a witness to a crime, we will never reveal the immigration status of anyone or report it to any other agency. The reason that immigrants are important to the district attorney's office is because in Nassau County, there are 291,000 foreign-born people that live among us. They come from many countries, including El Salvador, India, the Dominican Republic, China, Italy, Haiti, Jamaica, Ecuador, and Colombia are the highest numbers. And what is it that immigrants do in Nassau County? They work. They work in multiple industries. They plant our food and cultivate it. They harvest it. They transport it to the markets. They cook it in restaurants. They serve it. They build our roads and our skyscrapers. They put windows in our homes and do our driveways and our brickwork. They are doctors and lawyers. They are X-ray technicians and nurses, and they work across the entire labor spectrum, not only in Nassau County, but throughout the United States. On Long Island, the employment breakdown of our immigrant population is about 53% in the labor force are in white collars occupations, which include 16% of executive, administrative, and managerial workers, about 22% of highly educated professionals like doctors, lawyers, and engineers. And to echo the rabbi's words, I too am an immigrant. And approximately 26% of the registered nurses, therapists, and pharmacists are foreign-born. And if you go to a doctor's office or have the misfortune of having to go into a hospital, you know that the nurses, many of the doctors, many of the technicians, your pharmacists are foreign-born. Here in Nassau County, of the 291,000 foreign-born people living among us, 48,000, or about 17%, are undocumented. And what do? They are also working because they don't qualify for any level of social assistance. The majority, 29%, are in all sectors of employment. 15% are in construction, 18% in professional, scientific, management, and administrative work, 15% in arts, entertainment, recreation, hotels, and restaurants, 12% in education, health and social services, and 12% all other jobs. So how do undocumented immigrants enter the United States, or all immigrants for that matter? There are essentially 6 pathways of entry: refugees and asylum seekers. They are often interchanged when we refer to them, but they actually come to our country through very different means. unaccompanied minors, temporary protected status recipients, DACA, which is deferred action for childhood arrivals, and people who come with visas, whether they are visas to be a tourist or work or be a student. All visas are temporary, and like medications have expiration dates. And if a visitor overstays the visa for even one day, they are automatically undocumented. So let's talk about refugees. Under United States law, a refugee is someone who is located outside of the United States. They apply for refugee status from their country of origin, and they are vetted outside the United States. And when they are accepted to come in, they come in with a green card or permanent resident status. In order to qualify, the person has to be of special humanitarian concern to the United States, has to demonstrate that they were persecuted or fear persecution due to race, religion, nationality, political views, or membership in a particular social group. They cannot be resettled firmly in another country. In other words, they cannot have been refugees to another country, and they have to be otherwise admissible to the United States, which means that they cannot have been convicted of a crime, and they have to be of good moral character. The majority of our refugees at the present are coming from Afghanistan, Iraq, and other countries like Somalia, where we have troops or we are actively engaged in conflicts. And the refugees that come from those countries and qualify in the country of origin, you often work as translators or guides for our troops, and therefore face immediate danger of retaliation from other people or factions within their countries, which is why they qualify as refugees to the United States. Here on Long Island, Catholic Charities Immigration Services has had for many years a contract with the federal government to help resettle the refugees coming into Long Island. The prior administrator closed many resettlement offices, including Catholic Charities. And now at present, they are renegotiating to reopen with the current administration. And to give you an example, in the immediately past fiscal year, Catholic Charities resettled 143 refugees onto Long Island. The years before that, they were processing over 1,000 per fiscal year. Asylum is another pathway for people to enter our country. And every year people come to the United States seeking protection because they have suffered persecution or they will suffer persecution in their country of origin due to their race, their religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or a political party. If you are eligible for asylum, you may be permitted to remain in the United States. To apply for asylum, the person must petition USCIS within 1 year of arrival in the United States. And most of our asylees, people seeking asylum, are coming through the southern border at the present time. Many of them are unaccompanied children, and all unaccompanied children that come to the border are seeking asylum. The first step is to undergo at the border a credible fear interview. And if they don't pass that test, they are immediately returned back to Mexico. If they do pass it, then they enter the asylum process. Unaccompanied minors. Every year, tens of thousands of Central American children from Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras mostly, many of whom are vulnerable to trafficking or other forms of abuse, make the perilous journey north and attempt to cross the border into the United States seeking asylum. Many of these children and adolescents have been victims of gangs, or their families have been victims of gangs in their country of origin. The Trafficking Victims Protection Act and Reauthorization Act is improving the screening and protection of unaccompanied minors at the border and after repatriation, after they enter. International and national child protection laws protect these children. However, we are hearing about the crisis at the border at the present time. And what has happened is that the numbers, for example, in the last 2 months, have doubled. In February, Customs and Border Protection encountered 9,457 unaccompanied minors across the southern border. And that number doubled in March to 18,850. What happens at the border is that Customs and Border Protection agents have 72 hours to turn the children over to the Office of Refugee Resettlement, which is part of Health and Human Services. And about 90% of the children arriving are able to be united with a family member or a sponsor who is already in the United States. But because the numbers are growing so rapidly, they are having a bit of difficulty processing all the children in the time required. Although the children never stopped arriving at the border in 2020, most of them were not able to enter the United States and seek asylum because of a Trump-era rule known as Title 42. Title 42 allows officials to immediately expel anyone who tries to make unauthorized entry into the United States to make a claim of asylum, including children. The new administrator has slightly changed Title 42 in late January to allow for unaccompanied children to seek asylum, but most single adults and families continue to be expelled back into Mexico. They're not deported to their countries of origins. They are simply pushed back to Mexico. So this is why the numbers are so high right now at the southern border. Temporary protected status is another pathway for entry into the United States. Congress created temporary protected status, or TPS, in the Immigration Act of 1990. It is a temporary immigration status provided to nationals of specifically designated countries that are confronting an ongoing armed conflict, environmental disaster, or extraordinary and temporary conditions that make it difficult for them to live and remain in their countries of origin. One example of the last one is Venezuela. It provides a work permit and stay of deportation to foreign nationals from those countries who are in the United States at the time that the government makes the designation of the country in particular as protected. There are approximately 411,000 temporary protected status recipients residing in the United States as of October of 2020. It does not provide a path to permanent residency or citizenship. Designation of TPS is temporary, but can be renewed by our government. So the countries where we have temporary protected status at the moment, as of March of 2021, there are 12 countries. which are Burma, El Salvador, Haiti, Honduras, Nepal, Nicaragua, Somalia, South Sudan, Syria, Venezuela, and Yemen. Many of you have heard of the Dreamers, and the Dreamers are the recipients of Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA. This program was established by President Obama in 2012 and rescinded by President Trump in September of 2017. The federal courts overturned the executive order rescinding DACA in 2018. And in March of 2020, President Biden fully restored the program. As of 2018, approximately 800,000 individuals, young people referred to as Dreamers, were enrolled in the program we know as DACA. To qualify for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, the young people must meet the following major requirements, although meeting them does not guarantee approval. They have to have come to the United States before their 16th birthday and lived in the United States continuously since June 15th of 2007. And they have to have been less than 31 years of age on June 12th of 2012. They have to be physically present in the United States on June 15th, 2012, when the program was created, and at the time of making their request for consideration of deferred action with the USCIS, that is the U.S. Citizens and Immigration Service. In addition, to qualify for DACA, the young people have to have completed high school or a GED, have been honorably discharged for the armed forces, or they have to be enrolled in high school or college. They cannot have been convicted of a felony or any serious misdemeanors, or more than 3 minor misdemeanors, and do not otherwise pose a threat to national security. The DACA children are mostly in California, 424,000, almost 425,000 of them live in California, 234,350 are in Texas, 95,663 in New York, followed by almost 80,000 in Illinois, 74,000 in Florida, and 51,000 in Arizona. Visa overstays. The real immigration crisis is not at the southern border. Focusing on asylum seekers who cross the land borders ignores the real problem in immigration right now, which is people that overstay their visas. The undocumented population in the United States has actually been overall decreasing. The Pew Research Institute did a study recently that found that in 2007, there were 12.2 million undocumented people living in the United States. And 10 years later, in 2017, the number had decreased to 10.5 million. Why? Because almost 2 million Mexican undocumented residents went back to Mexico during that time. We are led to believe through the media or the positions that some politicians take that the majority of our undocumented population is from Mexico, but only 47% of the undocumented population in the United States right now is Mexican. Today, people from Asian countries make up the fastest growing population of undocumented immigrants. Out of 1.7 million undocumented Asian Americans of Pacific Islanders, a quarter of them live below the poverty line. Of all US migrants to the US, 40% at present are from Asia or South Asia. And of the 18 million overall Asian and South Asian immigrants in the United States, 1.7 million are undocumented. Interestingly enough, a quarter of the 1.7 million live below the poverty line. And Southeast Asian and Pacific Islanders are 5 times more likely to be deported for criminal convictions than any other immigration groups. The 4 largest Asian undocumented populations come from India, Korea, the Philippines, and China. And 99% of them become undocumented because they come on a visa and overstay it. I would like to remark on the difficult time that our Asian population is having at present in our country, and ask you to consider the necessity to create support and alliance for our Asian and South Asian brothers and sisters that are immigrants and are afraid to walk the streets. So the visa overstays are outnumbering illegal boarding crossings. The number of people overstaying their visas by country on any one particular year are Mexico, India, China, and Venezuela. And the number of people crossing the border illegally by country, the highest numbers are Mexico, El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. But on this particular year, 190,000 crossed the border illegally, and 320,000 overstayed their visas. And what types of visas are being overstayed? When we look at the student visa overstays, the majority of the overstays are from students from China, India, South Arabia, and with respect to pleasure or work visas that are not student visas, the largest number of overstays is from Canada, followed by Mexico, Brazil, Venezuela, and Nigeria. What the Office of Immigrant Affairs is engaging in terms of outreach to assist our immigrant populations is we are forming partnerships with the media to inform immigrants of their rights and to facilitate events for them to file complaints of fraud or labor violations with us directly. Unfortunately, there are many employers at present. They will hire an immigrant to work on a house remodeling project or any other type of project. And the person works for a period of time and the employer decides that they're not gonna pay them. And they tell them, well, you're undocumented, so I'm not gonna pay you. And if you report me, I'm going to report you to ICE. Well, that's extortion, which is a crime. ICE does not take those types of complaints. And under the labor law and the penal law, anybody who works in New York State, anybody who works in Nassau County is entitled to get paid under the law, regardless of their immigration status. We have a labor unit in the district attorney's office that I refer those complaints to after an initial review. We have a dedicated hotline for immigrants directly to report crimes to us. The Office of Immigrant Affairs does the initial investigation. And then if we find that there is criminality, we report the case to the Bureau that will handle it. We also have a lot of immigrants complain of fraud all different types of fraud. People who promise documents to them, work permits, lawyers, people who pretend to be lawyers and make promises they cannot keep and always take cash up front. And the immigrants are defrauded of thousands and thousands of dollars. We reach out directly to immigrants at houses of worship and community-based organizations. Right now, all that outreach, I'm doing it like I'm doing it right now with you, virtually, but we hope to be able to go back to in-person outreach very soon. I also do a lot of presentations at high schools, local colleges, and continuing education groups on the role of immigrants and the history of immigration on Long Island. And I was a member of the team that investigated the MS-13 murders in Nassau County on 2017 and 18. And through intelligence, we became aware that the gangs are recruiting members in the middle schools now. If you go to the high school, it's too late. They're already in the gang. So we created a project that I'm in charge of called the Pathways Project. And this project's purpose is to prevent gang participation by supporting and guiding newly arrived immigrant students. Our mission is to support newly arrived students in our immigrant communities through exercises on developing emotional intelligence, critical thinking. We do targeted presentations for them, anti-gang education, need-based referrals, and small support groups. These are some of my kids at Hempstead Middle School. And I want you to look at their faces because every one of those children was stopped at the border, was separated from whoever they were traveling with. Some of them traveled alone for weeks and left behind uncles, aunts, grandparents, brothers, sisters, cousins who had raised them, their friends, and came to Long Island to find a parent, sometimes two parents, that had left when they were very young to come here to make a better life. And now they were coming to reunite with them. Long Island does not accept any unaccompanied minors that don't have a tie to the communities, meaning in order to come to Long Island, an unaccompanied minor has to have a parent or a relative who is willing to take responsibility for them. And they get to Long Island because they have passed at the border the initial asylum criteria, and all of them are now in the asylum process in immigration court. What we do with them is we allow them a forum where they can talk about their frustrations in addition to our program, because many of them are now living with a parent they don't know, and they miss terribly the people they left behind. At the middle school, the only requirement to be a part of our program is that they have to have arrived on Long Island within the last 12 to 18 months. We do everything in Spanish because they don't speak English very well. They're learning, but they're bullied at the middle school because other students and even other Hispanic Latino students who've been who were born here, have been here for a number of years and are fluent in English, call them names like immigrant, as though that is an insult. And of course, part of our role is to let them know that being an immigrant is a privilege and an honor, and that this nation was built and continues to be built by immigrants. We bring guests to speak to them who had lived a similar experience, who have come into the country by land, who have made the adjustment and are now in college or in a profession. We expanded in 2019 the program, which we started in Hempstead in 2018. We expanded to Westbury because that's where the highest percentage of the newly arrived unaccompanied minors are going. So we're targeting those populations. And we have a large group at Westbury Middle School. They are wonderful kids, and they want, and we want to instill in them the desire to be like us, because all our staff are volunteer immigrants, and have a profession, continue study. That's the most important thing, and give them a pathway, which is why the program is called Pathways. So stepping away from my role as a lawyer for a second, because of who I'm talking to and where I am talking, the Torah tells us to defend the cause of the fatherless and the widow, to love the foreigner residing among us, to love those who are foreigners because we ourselves were foreigners in Egypt, to not oppress a foreigner because we know how it feels to be a foreigner, because we were foreigners in the land of Egypt. And if we look at ourselves and our families, we are all immigrants. It has been a pleasure for me to join you today. And I would love to answer any questions that you may have.
Can you, oh, sorry. Okay. So Sylvia, thank you very much. That was great. We really appreciate that. I myself have a couple of questions, and as I said in the beginning, I will follow up with you tomorrow or within the next couple of days for other questions that I may get in my email. I'm curious to know what relief may be available for probably mostly women, but I imagine there's men and children in that category too, who have come to the United States as victims of trafficking. And if there's some statutory or regulatory relief that might be available to them once it's shown that they were victims, and especially when we draw attention to the Asian Americans or the Asian immigrants who have been victimized recently.
Yes, absolutely. And time did not permit for me to go into U visas and trafficking visas. U visas are a form of immigration relief who is available to undocumented individuals who have been a victim of a designated crime. There are a number of designated crimes, and most of those crimes are violent in nature. And my office, the Office of Immigrant Affairs, certifies all the U visas when somebody has been, in fact, a victim of, for example, rape or child abuse or felonious assault. To give you some examples, we certify that, in fact, they have been a victim of that crime because we have a case, that they cooperated and assisted in the investigation and prosecution of the case, and that they have suffered substantial physical or psychological injury as a result of being a victim of the crime. That for undocumented immigrants, getting a U visa is the only currently existing pathway to legalization, other than marrying a citizen. And with respect to trafficking victims, we have the same type of remedy. It's called a T visa, which means trafficking visa, And when somebody has been designated a victim of trafficking, and we have a special court in Nassau County for trafficking victims, then I go through the same process and I create a document that is eventually filed by an immigration lawyer with naturalization services, and that is a pathway also for victims of trafficking to eventually become a permanent resident. But they are the only two pathways available now to undocumented individuals to legalize their status, either a U visa or a trafficking visa, and they're restricted. And this is why we need comprehensive immigration reform legislation.
I know the rabbi has a question for you, but I just wanted to point out the verbiage that you use when you talk about a person that we're talking about here, and we refer to them as undocumented and not as illegal, and that's sort of a pet peeve of mine. I tend to correct people when they say when they say somebody is illegal.
Well, I refer to them as undocumented or unauthorized. Human beings cannot be illegal. Entering the country without authorization is not a crime. It is a civil offense. So to call them illegal is legally inappropriate and inhumane.
I think we are agreed with you on that. I appreciate what you said, the little plug that you made for, having communities like ours support the Asian American community, especially at this frightening time. And I guess I was wondering if you had any recommendations of ways that we can advocate for them effectively.
There are organizations that are creating alliances and partnerships with Asian organizations. Some of them are Jewish. I just want to, for a second, look at my note. I know that we in the DA's office are going to be doing a video public service announcement. We're filming it next week with participants from our staff that belong to multiple ethnic communities in support of the Asian population. But there are Asian American and Pacific Islander youth groups like Aspire, ASPIRE, and RAISE, RAISE. They have launched Raise Our Story, which is a platform for awareness and to showcase stories of Asian American youth and Asian American immigrants. But it's very easy to create alliances with Asian community-based organizations or houses of worship and do joint services or support services. There's a couple of synagogues in the South Shore where I participated in services that were specifically designated for support of our Asian brothers and sisters, and of course they participated as well, the Asian Americans. So there are a number of ways of doing it, and we can talk offline about it if you want. But I think that given our history and given the history of exclusion that immigrant Jews have gone through in the United States, starting in the 1500s until the 20th century, Asian Americans have a similarly troubled history of exclusion from immigration through multiple acts of Congress. in the United States. So there is a lot of commonalities. And right now they're at a point where they're afraid to walk the streets, and that's just unfortunate. And if you go to Chinatown in Manhattan now, many people are walking around with their heads down because they're afraid to raise their heads and have people notice their facial features. So there's a lot going on that needs to be addressed in this quadrant of our population.
Well, we certainly appreciate your calling us to meet that need, and we really appreciate all that you've shared with us and all that you've taught us today, and we're grateful for your time and your insight and your expertise, and we wish you continued success in your work, which is, I would say, important and also sacred. So thank you once again to Silvia Finkelstein for joining us today. Thank you again to Linda Leibowitz for connecting us with Silvia in a meaningful way. And be on the lookout for more opportunities over the coming weeks to learn more about refugee and immigrant issues and how they relate to us as the Jewish community. We want to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your Shabbat day.
It has been my pleasure to spend this time with you. Shabbat Shalom to all of you.
Shabbat Shalom.